Hello, everybody, and welcome in live to another edition of the Bleeding Burnt Orange here show on Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. We are here on the SEC channel, and we're here on the Texas channel. The Texas channel is officially back to being Mark Rogers TV, so hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and join us every Wednesday, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. I usually jump in a little bit late to drive you guys here. So please hit that like button. Please subscribe. Don't worry, I'm going to be here every Wednesday, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And before we jump into the important stuff, let's get to this. Take care of the channel here. Type in promo code BIG for $10 off a purchase of $100 more to any sporting event at ticketsmarter.com, and $100 off a promo code of or $100 or sorry, $20 off. I cannot speak of a purchase of $300 or more at ticketsmarter.com. Please do that, guys. Be smarter. Don't be dumb. Go over to ticketsmarter.com. And again, hit that like button and subscribe down below. So, guys, 10.5 wins isn't reasonable. We'll talk about that. We'll also talk about what it takes to win a national championship, because I believe at this point, Texas is in the odds of the top 5 to win a national championship next year. And when I saw them tied with Georgia, guys, when I saw them tied with Georgia to win, to be for odds to win the SEC, or basically have the same odds of winning 10.5 games or more or less, but that's what the odds are set at. I was shocked. I thought it would have been a little bit lower. I was thinking a 9.5, 10, because I think Texas goes 10-2 next year. So I would bet the under at this point. I could be wrong. I'm hoping I'm wrong. But 10.5 is very high, and it's very interesting. And it's going to be interesting what the odds. I think Texas is third in odds at this point. I think it goes Georgia, Ohio State, then Texas. I'm going to look that up right now. And I think it's deserved because of the blue chip ratio, which we'll get into a little bit later, the transfer portal that was brought in that also helps with the championship with sorry, with the championship aspirations. My gosh, sorry guys. And Steve Sarkisian, I think he's become a better coach over his time here on the 40 acres. So 10.5 is a surprising number. The odds to win a national championship surprising as well. But overall, I think Texas has the case and can definitely get it done. We will dive into that now, guys. Actually, I'm going to share my screen with you because I think it's going to show you what I believe to be the case and what I think is going to happen. So I'm going to share my screen. We're going to go over to my PowerPoint here. And we're going to show you guys what I can do. Entire screen. So we'll go to entire screen here. Share. PowerPoint. And here we go, guys. So the average, this is the average. We'll talk about that in a minute. So what it takes to win a national championship, we'll go through the numbers, go through the teams. Let's start it with 2023 Michigan. So Michigan's actually on the lower end of the blue chip ratio. And for you guys wondering what a blue chip ratio is, it basically shows how many 4 and 5-star kids you get from high school or junior college. I believe that now includes the portal as well, is blended in. So 54% is on the lower end, guys. We'll get to the average at the end. JJ McCarthy, I included the quarterback, guys. It's the most important position on the field. And JJ McCarthy has a chance. He probably will end up being a first-round pick, and I think that's important here to mention. And then they were dominant. Average offense, 35.9 points per game with the 14th overall in that department, and 10.4 points per game, which is first overall. And drafted players is blank, guys, because I don't know at this point how many drafted players Michigan is going to have. Michigan is going to send 18 guys to the combine, and that's a crazy number and a number that is going to break records, guys. So it's going to be very interesting how many guys they get drafted. I'm going to say about 15 because that is the record. I think it would be kind of crazy to give them more than record without it happening. So I'm going to say they're going to have around 15 guys drafted, and I'll put the number at 15 just so when we get to the average, that's what it turns out to be. So 2022 Georgia, guys, 77% overall blue chip ratio, and that's more than norm when you get to it. We'll see that again when we jump in the average. Stetson Bennett was drafted in the 4th round. I forgot how high he was drafted, which was crazy, by the Rams. And again, this team, top 5 in both offense and defense, guys. They are very good all over the field. And they had 10 players drafted. It was tied for first overall in that next year's draft. And guys, that's again too, when I show you players drafted, that's not of the totality of the team through all 4 years or whatever. It's from the year after. They had 10 players drafted in the 2023 NFL draft, which was tied for first. Next up, we go to Georgia, which was a back-to-back national championship team, and the blue chip ratio was even higher. It was 80% overall. Stetson Bennett leading the way again. Offense stays the same. They were 5th overall. Their average on defense was 10.2 points per game. It's right. And Michigan compares very well to this team on the defensive side of the ball. They were 1st overall that year, and they broke the record, guys. They broke the record for players drafted with 15 players overall drafted. That is an insane number. That is a number that I think Michigan can tie this year, but an absolutely overall insane number. They broke 2019 LSU's record. And again, guys, this is the year after. So the 2022 draft, they had 15 players drafted. Remember, it's always the year after. I'm not including everyone. Next up, Alabama. 83% blue chip ratio overall. Mac Jones, again, a first-round quarterback in the NFL draft. You can argue whether he should have been, but he was. They were the second best offense that year with 48.5 points per game, again, led by Steve Sarkisian. And this is a COVID year, so you do have to take that into account. Defense, they weren't as good at 19.4 points per game, 13th overall, and tied for first again in players drafted. You're seeing a trend here, guys, and it's pretty obvious who you can basically narrow this down to who can win the national championship when I get to the average. And if you want to bet on that, I wouldn't see it as a bad strategy, honestly, but it's not gambling advice. Let me state that first. And like I said, first overall with 10 players drafted. Blue chip ratio for LSU, again, on the lower end, but when you get to the next person on this list, next thing on this list, you understand why. Blue chip ratio is 64% overall, again, on the lower end. Joe Burrow, you can argue had the best season in the history of college football. I think there's one other guy you can argue that with, and that's Cam Newton. So it's either first or second seasons overall. 48.4 points per game on offense. Defense was 21.9 points per game, which was 32nd. That is the worst on this list. And they had the record at the time the next year. 14 players drafted, number one that year in the NFL. 2018 Clemson, again on the lower end, but then you get to the quarterback, and that's why I included the quarterback. 61% overall blue chip ratio. Quarterback Trevor Lawrence went in the first round. 44.3 points per game, 4th overall in the country. And on defense, 13.9 points per game. That was 1st overall. Drafted players, they had 6. That was tied for 7th. Again, that's kind of low, but when you have a generational college quarterback and a guy that's a pretty good NFL quarterback, that is why you win the national championship. Next up, we have Alabama. Again, an insane blue chip ratio of 80%. Tua Tagovailoa. I have him as the starter here, guys, because it's between him or Jalen Hurts. When they won the national championship, Tua Tagovailoa was the one that made a throw. He is the starting quarterback for me on this team. Average 37.1 points per game. That is 15th. Average defense, 11.9 points per game. That is 1st. And again, number one players drafted in the following year's drafts. And Tua Tagovailoa, a first-round quarterback. Hell, if you wanted to say Jalen Hurts, I think he was drafted in the 2nd round. So, again, you are seeing a trend here. There's only one guy on this list that won't be an NFL player. 2016 Clemson, by far the lowest, or not by far, but the lowest on the list with 52%. Deshaun Watson, as you see, my respect for Deshaun Watson, the football player, because, again, off-field stuff, but the football player grew a lot doing this research. Not great on offense, not great on defense. Only 8 players drafted, tied for 7th in the next year's draft, and the blue chip ratio is lower. Deshaun Watson carried this team. He is underrated, in my opinion, when it comes to college football quarterbacks of all time. I think he's top 5. And after doing this research, I don't think there's really a debate. And next year, this is the one guy on the list that didn't get drafted. Jake Coker, I believe he was an undrafted free agent, so he did have a cup of coffee in the NFL, or at least got signed to a team. He was not drafted, though. Blue chip ratio is 77%. This is the worst offensive team on the list at 35.1 points per game, which is 30th overall in the country. And average defense was 15.1 points per game, which was 3rd overall. Drafted players. They had 7 drafted players tied for 4th. Again, high up. Now, this next one's going to throw a monkey wrench in things, guys, because 2014 Ohio State, you see drafted players 5th. tied for 10th. The next year, they led it. So, again, you do kind of miss some things when you just go off the next year, but everyone came back for that 2015 Ohio State team, and then they led it in the country with the next year, which I believe 12th in players drafted. But the year after of this year, they only had 5th. Blue chip ratio, or 5 guys. Blue chip ratio is 68% overall. Cardale Jones, I have him as starting quarterback. He won the national championship. He won those playoff games. I have to use him. He beat Wisconsin in the Big Ten championship game. He played in the NFL. He was drafted in the NFL. Average offense, 4.8 points per game, which is 5th overall. And defense, 22 points per game, which is 26 overall. So, guys, again, please hit that like button. Please subscribe down below. We are going to jump into that average real quick and talk about what that means and if Texas can live up to those expectations. So, the average, guys, the blue chip ratio is 69.6%. So, basically, between 69 and 70%, if you want to round up to 70, that is perfectly fine with me. Texas, I know in this upcoming draft class did meet that ratio. I believe overall they meet this ratio as well. So that bodes well. They were the number 1 team in the country, actually, between transfer portal and recruiting class of blue chip ratio. They were over 80%, guys. So I believe just based off what I know of the draft classes under Steve Sarkisian, they are over or have met this threshold. Now, this next one is a very important one, guys. Their QB was drafted in half have been first-round picks. Every one of these QBs have been drafted, guys, other than Jake Coker. Quinn Ewers is going to be drafted. He's going to be drafted. Will he be a first-round pick? I do not know. If he is a first-round pick, guys, this team will be in the Final Four next year. I can almost guarantee that. Just based off of historical data, if Quinn Ewers is a first-round quarterback, they will be in the Final Four. I'm not saying they're going to win the national championship, but they will be one of the Final Four teams standing. Average offense is 9.5. And the worst offense was 2015 Alabama, 30th overall, but they had a top 3 defense. So if you're going to be very bad on offense, you have to have a top 5 defense. I think if you're 30th or and by the way, I think that's the worst you can be offensively. I think 30th is probably a good, maybe 35th. Let's say you're the 35th best offense with the first best defense. That is possible. I don't think that is the formula for Texas to win next year. I think actually when we get down to the defense, I think 2019 LSU might be the way to go, guys, with the offensive talent that we have. So we'll get down there. Average defense is 9.3. Worst was 2019 LSU, but again, I think that's the blueprint for Texas. I really do. They're 32nd on offense, but they had the number 1 offense, and they had one of the best seasons ever from a quarterback. They had Jamar Chase, Terrence Marshall, and Justin Jefferson. I'm not saying we have those wide receivers, but if Quinn Ewers can be 90% of Joe Burrow with the offensive weapons we have, and I think our defense is probably going to be in the 20 to 25 range, that is good enough. That is what I believe Texas has to follow blueprint-wise and can win the national championship. And then 10.2 players drafted in next year's drafts. Off the top of my head, guys, Kelvin Banks is going to be drafted. Quinn Ewers is going to be drafted. I believe if Jaden Blue has a good enough year, he will leave in the NFL draft. If he's a 3rd-round pick, he will be drafted. Then we're going, let's see, Jake Majors will be drafted. That's 4 guys. Isaiah Bond, 5, will be drafted. On the defensive side of the ball, Andrew Makuba will be drafted. If Terrence Brooks has a good year, he will be drafted. That's 7. Ethan Burke will be drafted. That's 8. Barron Sorrell will be drafted. And then Alfred Collins will definitely be drafted. That is 10 guys. That's 10 right off the top of my head. And there might be more. Again, some of those depend on if they declare for the next year's draft. Texas does meet most of this criteria. I'm going to leave this up for a second, then I'm going to go back and unshare. But Texas does meet a lot of this criteria, guys. They really do. So we'll see what happens. But Texas meets this criteria. And for them, there are a couple things that it depends on mostly. And I think number 1 is, can Quinn Ewers be a first-round quarterback? I think if Quinn Ewers is a first-round quarterback, that guarantees Texas a Final Four spot in the college football playoff. I would bet money on that. If you told me Quinn Ewers is going to be a first-round pick, I'm going to bet money that they're a Final Four team. Next up, this team, if you add that on, If this team is a top 25 defense, I believe they get to the national championship game. So if Quinn Ewers is a first-round quarterback and they're a top 25 team on defense, this team will be in the national championship. I believe for this team to win a national championship, they're going to have at least 10 guys drafted in next year's NFL draft. I think some guys are going to have to perform to the level to where they are forced to leave. The guys I mentioned on that list, Jane Blue, he's going to have a very good year and opt in for the NFL draft. Terrence Brooks is going to have a very good year and opt in for the NFL draft. Ethan Burke, another guy, is going to have a very good year and opt in for the NFL draft. Those are the names off the top of my head. I'm trying to think who else could David Benda, I didn't even mention. He'll be another one drafted. I think the maximum for this Texas team is probably 13 or 14. I'm going to say 13 NFL players drafted next year. I think the minimum is 7. For them to win a national championship, they have to be over 10. That is what they have to do. So if they have 10 players drafted, minimum, they have Quinn Ewers as a first-round pick, and they have a top 25 defense, I would bet my money. If you told me all those things at the end of the year, I would bet my money Texas wins the national championship. Those are the 3 biggest questions if Texas can win the national championship. Do I think all of them will happen? Probably not. Do I think 1 out of 3 is going to happen? Yes. I believe one of those 3 things will happen. If I had to put money on it, I think Quinn Ewers is going to be a first-round pick in next year's NFL draft. I really believe in him and the path he's following. I believe he will be able to be a first-round draft pick. If I'm ranking them on what I believe will happen, I believe Quinn Ewers will be a first-round draft pick. I believe we will have 10 or more guys drafted in the NFL draft next year, next draft. And I believe number 3 for me would be a top 25 defense. There's some question marks there. We lose Jalen Ford. We lose Ryan Watts. We lose the 2 big guys in the middle in Murphy and Sweat. And by the way, Murphy is just continuing to climb up boards. Most mock drafts have him as a top 20 pick. Guy's going to be a first-round pick. Could be as high as the 5th or 6th overall pick. Could be, I think the lowest it will get is probably 25, 26. So that is a lot to deal with and a lot to replace. You're replacing 5 top 50 guys in the NFL draft. That is why Quinn Ewers has to pick up the slack. If Quinn Ewers does not pick up the slack, we'll make the playoff. We might win 1 game. We might win 1 game. If Quinn Ewers is the exact guy that he was this year, and we're replacing all those guys, and you have new talent coming in, we'll win 1 college football playoff game. We'll be a top 8 team, and we'll lose. If Quinn Ewers is a first-round pick, we'll be a top 4 playoff team. If we have 10 guys drafted, we'll be a national championship team. If we meet all 3 of those criteria, Quinn Ewers, first-round pick, 10 guys or more drafted, and a top 25 defense, I believe we will win the national championship. So, guys, it's a quick show, but I think it's a very thoughtful and informative show. Again, please hit that like button. Please subscribe down below. Guys, I'm trying to grow this channel, and I believe I'm delivering very good content. So please hit that like button. Please subscribe down below. Go over to ticketsmarter.com. Type in code BIG for $10 off a purchase of $100 or more, and type in code BIG20 for $20 off a purchase of at least $300 or more at ticketsmarter.com. Don't be dumb, be smarter. Go to ticketsmarter.com. And guys, again, Wednesday, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time, I am delivering you Bleeding Burnt Orange live. This was the 33rd edition right here on the Mark Rogers channel, Texas channel. Hit the subscribe button and like. And the SEC Mark Rogers channel, hit the subscribe button and like. I will be here every Wednesday in the off season. We'll probably rerun this video when I do have more people and add more detail to it. And I'm here every Saturday after the game during the season. So please hit the like button. Please subscribe down below. Thank you guys for being here. Share this with friends, family, neighbors, people you run into, anyone, the random guy you see at the gym. Have him watch this as well and have him hit that like button. Thank you guys. Hook 'em.